turibuka ubwicanyi ndengakamere bwakorewe Abanyamulenge 13 zo kwa munani 2004.
Byari ijoro ry'umubabaro, ijoro ryuzuye imiborogo, ubwo abacu bitwaga urw'agashinyaguro. Hari umugoroba usanzwe nk'indi,
abana bakina basabana, abavyeyi nabo batoreye batazi ku mwanzi yapanze gutsemba ubwoko Burundi. Hari umugoroba usanzwe nk'indi, abana bakina basabana, abavyeyi nabo batoreye batazi ku mwanzi yapanze gutsemba ubwoko Burundi. Turibuka inzira karengane z'Abanyamulenge ziciwe urw'agashinyaguro mu Gatumba. Ubutwari bwanyu n'umurage mwadusigiye niduteze kuzazibagirwa.
Nukumwanza aratwikararasa abasore beza n'inkumi.
Mbega ijoro ntazibagirwa, mbega ijoro ry'umubabaro ryasize imfuvyi n'abapfakazi, mbega ijoro ntazibagirwa.
Abagore n'abana b'ibitambambuga batwikirwa mu mazu,
mbega ijoro ntazibagirwa, mbega ijoro ry'umubabaro ryasize imfuvyi n'abapfakazi, mbega ijoro ntazibagirwa.
Abagabo beza bakoreye Imana bicwa urw'agashinyaguro.
Turibuka inzira karengane z'Abanyamulenge ziciwe urw'agashinyaguro mu Gatumba. Ubutwari bwanyu n'umurage mwadusigiye niduteze kuzazibagirwa. Humura Mulenge, humura, komera Mulenge, ukomere. Humura Mulenge, humura, komera Mulenge, ukomere.
Papa mukuru ati uje iwabo ntayoboza kandi natunga itoroshi, igihe cyo gutaha agenda yemye.
3 ukwezi k'umunani 2004 mu Gatumba narahekuwe bizatuma kwicwa no kurengana bitazongera kubaho ku bwoko bwacu
bimenyekane
bizatuma tutongera kumva induru y'abicwa bizatuma tutongera kubona biruka bahunga twibuke Abanyamulenge bishwe rubi twese hamwe twibuke abacu ndibuka impinja n'abana bato bishwe abasore n'inkumi bishwe rubi
tutazongera kubabara kubw'akarengane k'umunyamulenge tuzira uko dusa n'ibyo dufite hari igihe tutazongera kwitwa umunsi dusubire iwacu twubake Murenge. Hari igihe tutazongera kubabara kubw'akarengane k'umunyamurenge. Tuzira uko dusa n'ibyo dufite. Hari igihe tutazongera kwitwa impunzi, dusubire iwacu twubake Murenge.
Turabibuka purazi Murenge, turabazirikana bana b'iwacu. Turabibuka purazi Murenge, turabazirikana.
Ndarira kibuka ya joro, ijoro yanze guca, ijoro rya Gatumba, ijoro ryanze guca. Ndarira kibuka rya joro, ijoro ryanze guca, ijoro rya Gatumba, ijoro ryanze guca. Dufite agahinda turababaye, dufite agahinda turababaye. Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, urazi Murenge turabazirikana. Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, urazi Murenge turabazirikana. Mwishwe muzize uko mwaremwe, urazi Murenge turabazirikana. Ndibuka Kadafi Minyati na Nyamasoso Rutekereza, ndibuka Nyahumure Gasosi, ndibuka Ntarutwa Nyamusore na Bisetsa Rukamigo, ndibuka Fiye Hayizuru na Nyabyiza Gato, ndibuka Munoni Muhimuzi na Esperance Shema, ndibuka Musa Shoni na Ziraje Kasa, ndibuka Dudu Bitati na Bebe Zarote, ndibuka Neza Kanyabitabo na Chantal Musafiri, ndibuka Claude Gabingi na Lydia Musafiri, ndibuka Muhora na Mandevu na Fisto Butoto, ndibuka Nyabyinshi Muhire na Dando Mukwi, ndibuka Tantine Gaturuturu na Fiye Mugabe, ndibuka Muza Rukungugu na Patrick Sebahire, ndibuka Rusengo Inyegeza, ndibuka Ange Maniragaba na Jeanne Ntwari, ndibuka Nkunda Gishoma na Innocent Biguge ndetse na Boss. Abo bose badusize bakiri bato. Nimwigendere mw'abana mwe, nimwigendere mw'abasore mwe, nimwigendere mwarungano. Turibuka ababyeyi bakundaga Imana, Pasiteri Rutekereza wakundaga gusenga, Pasiteri Minyari wakundaga ikanisa, umucuranzi shoni wakundaga gucuranga, umucuranzi gasore wakundaga gutanga, umukinyi ngwabi wakundaga umupira. Nimwigendere, nimwiruhukire, turabibuka, turabibuka. Dufite agahinda, turababaye, dufite agahinda, turababaye. Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, turazimurenge, turabazirikana. Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, turazimurenge, turabazirikana. Mwishwe muzize uko mwaremwe, turazimurenge, turabazirikana.
Dufite agahinda, dufite intimba,
turababaye. Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, turazimurenge, turabazirikana. Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, turazimurenge, turabazirikana. Mwishwe muzize uko mwaremwe, turazimurenge, turabazirikana.
Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, turazimurenge, turabazirikana. Bana b'iwacu turabibuka, turazimurenge.
niwe muco ukimurikira kandi abasaza nabo niyo ntebe yicarwaho abasore nabo niyo majambere y'igihugu bose bajanywe na rya joro ngirente nkora iki rya joro ry'ikarimi ryuzuye umubabaro ryadusigiye imfubyi ryadusigiye abapfakazi amaraso y'inzirakarengane yatsembaga nk'umugezi abo twanganaga baradusize bazize uko Imana yabaremye Mana ubakira mu bwami bwawe tubashyize mu buryo bwawe ibibazo byahekuye igihugu oya oya ye tirikagaruke tirikagaruke tirikagaruke.
Hello everyone, just welcome everybody to I'm just welcoming Alex Invoka to start our meeting. I think he was struggling with the network or something like that, but I think now he's ready. Alex Invoka, you're ready to start. Thank you very much. Our MC Alex Invoka. You can start now.
Bana b'iwacu turabibuka Murenge turabazirikana Bana b'iwacu turabibuka Murenge turabazirikana
ndarira kibuka ya joro ijoro ryanze guca ijoro rya Gatumba ijoro ryanze guca ndarira kibuka ya joro.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let me start by welcoming everyone at this event. It is 17th memorial service of the Gatumba massacre, which to the victims and relatives and the community of Banyamulenge, it was a genocide. Of course, a genocide has to be confirmed in many cases. Has to wait for a special rapporteur to confirm that it's a genocide. But many reports have confirmed this was a genocide nature. So we'll be talking about this. Some of the speakers will be talking about this. So this is really part of our series of events going on around the world. Started by thanking the host, Innocent, who's been really tirelessly working hard to bring all these events together, and really organize the speakers as well. Today's event is very special in the sense that it is the only event that brings experts who have different kind of expertise and knowledge around the question of justice, and why continuing to remember. The last point I would like to say is that quite often every year people ask, why continuing to remember the victims of Gatumba, especially when genocide tend to be quantified. It has to hit 1 million to be called a genocide or to be significant, politically significant. For survivors and relatives, Gatumba has not stopped. It's still going on. Itself is enough to be commemorated and to be remembered, but it has not stopped. So many people still being targeted and killed simply because of who they are, in the same context as in the Gatumba massacre. So, without further ado, let me start by introducing the first speaker. We would like to share the apologies from the keynote speaker, Rebecca Long, MP of somewhere in Manchester. She today at the last minute she has tragic news of her colleague who passed away, and she sent her apology. And she was supposed to be accompanied by Councillor Alexis Murura, who both have been incredibly supporter of the Gatumba cause in the UK. MP Rebecca has been really trying hard to raise awareness as a parliament and questioning the government in terms of what can be done in terms of their influence. So we're going to hear, as we don't have Rebecca today, we're going to hear from someone who started with a testimony, Espoir Nindeba. If he's with us, he's going to share his testimony. I also wanted to say to the speakers, please use 10 minutes of your time to speak about the topic you've been given. We would like to leave certain time for questions at the end. So in your 10 minutes, please provide some key way forward. So, tell us a little bit more about what next. Provide some practical recommendation on what this network could do. Thank you. So welcome, Espoir Nindeba, to speak to us.
Yes, thank you so much for welcoming me. Hopefully, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so thank you. My name's Nindeba Espoir, and I'm one of the Gatumba survivors. Just like many of the people who were there, I was a very young lad. I was a kid, and so I believe I was 5 to 6 years old at the time when the massacre had happened. And so to us as kids, you don't really know what's going on because you're in the shadow of your parents. And so being in that shadow, it kind of heeds you from what's really going on around, right? But that night was the very first night that we got to experience what our parents actually go through on a almost not daily basis, but like on the regular. But yeah, so it was just a regular day, just like any other. But we were playing that morning and afternoon, and just the normal thing that we would do: go play soccer and all these other things. And, at night, it's whenever they came, the rebels that they came, and they they had women, they had men, they had kids, they had drums, they had everybody from their community or whoever they were came, and they were destroying tents. They were burning tents. They were in bombs in the tents. They were shooting people. And in our tent, whenever they started shooting, I remember there was a guy who was standing in the in the front of the door, and we only had one door to go in and out. He was standing in the door, and he had a machine gun. And he was just like shooting, just blasting all over the tent. Um, and so by that blasting, and also they started to burn the tent as well. And from there, my dad decided if we stay in here, we're either going to get killed by the bullets or we're gonna burn to death. Um, and so my dad cut a hole on the side of the tent, so that we can be able to escape. Um, and right before he cut the tent, my mom, my sister got shot, and my mom also got shot. And right after, I got shot as well. And the bullet that went through my mom is the one that kind of came in and went through my chest and my shoulder. And from there, we were three wounded people, and we only had my older sister. She was the only one who wasn't shot. But before Howard got shot, my dad got out the hole that he had made, and so he was pulling me out. On his way pulling me out, there was a gentleman and a woman and a kid who were on like the side of the tent, like right in front of the tent. Though they saw him, they were just like, oh, they recognized the man. They said that man is a pastor in this community. Do not kill him. Just bring him without killing him. So whenever my dad was pulling me, there was a guy who was just like shooting. Um, and so the bullet that went through my mom, he went through me. So I literally just fell. I passed out because of the bullet. So my dad thought that I was dead, I'm guessing. So he took off because they were chasing him. They were trying to grab him. And the people that were chasing him, um, and also passed me because they thought that I was dead. So my family pulled me back in. They put me back in the tent. And after a couple of minutes, I woke back up, and at that time the tent was already burnt halfway, and a lot of people from our tent had passed and were dead, and some were just like, going in front of the door so they can get killed, so that way the people don't have to come in the tent to come look for us. So there was a lot of people who sacrificed themselves to save us, and that was a very tremendous thing, and not an easy thing. And after the whole, we were able to manage to escape. We ran, and there was a hole on the other side of the road. That was about a mile or two from our tent. We got to it, and we found other families that were hiding there. And there was a vehicle that was picking up the people who were wounded. And from there, they took all the people who were wounded, and they took all of us, and they took us to the hospital, the nearby hospital. When we got to the nearby hospital, that's whenever we saw everybody who were wounded, and there was still more people that they were still bringing. And so they started getting those who were critically injured, like, and taking them to general hospitals in Burundi. And among those people that they were taking who were critically injured, me, my sister, and my mom were among them, and my cousin. And so we went to those. Me and my mom went to the same hospital. My sister went to a different hospital. And at that time, we're thinking our dad is dead. We didn't even know. where he was without they capturing, or maybe they just shot him. We didn't know he was alive. And so after 3 days, he came to visit us in the hospital, and he was alive and he was okay. And so from there, uh, the way I got shot was I got shot in my right shoulder, and the bullet didn't come out my chest. For some reason, it stayed in, and he ended up traveling all the way on my left shoulder, and so they were able to do surgery, and they got it out, but they didn't. The people, the doctors or the nurses, they didn't tell us that I had fragments, or I don't know if they didn't see them or anything. So from then we went into a refugee camp in Mwaro in Burundi, and from there in Burundi we stayed there for, I believe, 3 years. Um, we stayed there for 3 years, and then after 3 years, they started a process to for people who were who were affected by this war to given a chance to come to the U.S. And so we also started that process, and we were among the families that were selected, among the very first family that was selected. So we were on the first plane that came here to the U.S. And whenever we got here to the U.S., we got here in Austin, Texas, and from then we didn't speak any English. My parents and my older siblings, they spoke French, but I only spoke Swahili and our language. So that's the only languages that I knew, and but we didn't speak any English. So it became very tough um, to navigate around the city, and to know which food to eat, or where to get milk, or what's milk, or all these other different things. But we were able to manage due to the care that we were given here, and um, the the courage, the amazingness of people who were helping us. We were given a translator who spoke French, or a caseworker and everything. So she really helped us to understand, but also the ESL class here. And so as I was growing up here in Austin, Texas, here in America, um, I started to like also being closer to, or kind of understanding the system of this place, because as a kid, anywhere you go, you're gonna adapt to whatever place that you're at. That's whatever place you're at. That's most likely what you are going to become as well. Uh, so I started navigating through the whole place and kind of just like understanding it. And um, I went through school. I went from elementary. I came when I was in sixth grade, but because of my age, they put me back to fourth grade. And so I did fourth grade, um, from elementary to middle school to high school. And then high school was a very uh, turning point, because high school, that's whenever I actually spoke English. And so I started to understanding the system a little bit more. I started to understanding about what really goes on in the U.S. and how to live here, or how to the strategies to best fit and uh, be successful in the U.S. And so from there, I kind of just focus on education, but I still didn't know a lot about school and a lot about um, you know going to college, and or searching for jobs, or applying for financial aid and all these other things. So but I managed to graduate in the top class at school, and then from there, I received a scholarship from the University of Texas here in Austin. um, and so I went to we ended up moving back here to Austin, and I did my 4 years at the university, and I was studying pre med, but also I had minor in business, and I was also a double major, so I was also majoring again in physical therapy or kinesiology. So I was doing all those three things just because I knew I wanted to be successful. Obviously, as a kid who grew up with nothing, I wanted to do something that can make me money, and but also school is not a very easy thing, so it became a bit challenging. So, but I really thank my advisor, who tremendously helped me with the process of going through college and just knowing what to do. So I was able to finish my 4 years there with a full scholarship, and got to the time where I had to decide what I wanted to do continuing, whether study I wanted to do business, or whether I wanted to do medical or pre-med, or I wanted to do kinesiology. So I was in like a trance of me kind of trying to decide of what to do or what to choose to study. So my mind was already made that I was going to do kinesiology and pursue physical therapy. But from there, my advisor saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. So he was just like, well, you also, again, one of the top students here at school, at the universities. And he said, my grades and everything. And so why don't you apply to medical school? I was just like, I can, but that wasn't in my agenda. I wasn't really thinking about it, just because it was hard. I can't, to me, I already put it in my mind that I can't do it. He was just like, you have the grades and you have the knowledge for it, so why not, why not do it? So we made a deal. We did all the applications, and we applied to, I believe, we applied to a lot of schools, but we applied to four public universities, and public and private universities, and then we applied to seven Ivy League schools. And so from there, we kind of just let it. And after like application from those colleges started coming in, and with God's grace and everything, I was able to get into a medical school in Boston, out of Harvard Medical School. And so from that process on, I really took it. I was just like, wow, I saw myself as how much I limit myself from, or how much we limit ourselves from what we can able to do. And so they were asking about who, are my motivation, who was my motivation for me to be here. I'm just like, the very first person, the very first people who motivates me are my parents. My parents give me all the motivation and courage that I need, and they are probably, to me, the best parents in the world, because the care that they give me, and the freedom, and the uh, knowledge to explore this country that they gave me, and also in the wisdom that they feed me. But also the other place where I find my motivation um, is from those people that we lost from Gatumba, right? Like, for example, like the man who kind of sacrificed himself, and and went on, and so that he can get killed, so that we don't so the person don't have to come in the tents and kill all of us, or all my friends who we used to play and outside, and who died and I didn't. So kind of just knowing that somebody that you knew, somebody that you used to hang out with, somebody that was your uncle or your father or your mother, um, passed away, and you're still alive, and you're still here. That's who gives me the strength to move on. And so as I go on to do more things, I was able to uh, also kind of do like a strategy thing with business, and now that I'm working with some of the world leaders and CEOs and governors and things like that. So all these opportunities that I'm given, I'm trying to make it not go to waste. Trying to utilize it best possible, by still trying to learn this country, learn this system. Because my thing is, I want to learn everything that I can possible here, so that way I can go and fix or and help back home. Per se, that's the only way that I see that happening, is by attaining the knowledge and the strategies of this place. If somebody is better than you or something, right, you have to give them props for that. So you're learning all the knowledges from here or Europe or Canada or Asia, all those strategies, and taking it back home and using it to our advantage, and build our and build our country. I mean, and build our country and build our place, and serve our people. That's always the goal. But yeah, that's just a little bit of my story. I didn't want to take much of your time.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much, Espoir. That's really, really powerful. I had heard about many testimonies from survivors of Gatumba, but it's really first time to hear from someone who was a child at the time. I've read the book "How Dare the Sun Rise" by Sandra Willingimana, who was a child at the time too. But I had not heard really someone speaking. That's incredibly powerful. Thank you so much for doing that. You provide us a journey really of then and after, especially your resilience, which probably fit within the concept of community therapy. Wanting to do something as part of our healing, as part of our coping with what you saw, and such a triumph in terms of our integration in the new societies is just incredible. We're going to hear from Chris Davey, who came with his colleague Jay Mortensen. I hope the right way to say his surname. I hope you both can be able to talk to us within 10 minutes. I've known Chris part of his research, and it's really always nice to see you as part of this event and continue to support the community as part of your contribution through academic research. Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. Just bear with me one moment. What we're going to be doing today is just saying a little bit about an ongoing research project which explores the Gatumba project and testimony from survivors like Espoir, and how this work has been done in collaboration with the community, and then what we're looking to do next. So without delay, I'm going to pass over to Jay here to kind of highlight for us some of these important points about the project. Jay, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Davey. I'm not seeing the presentation. I don't know if you've shared it yet.
Oh, that's a good point. Let me try that one more time. Okay. If this is a problem, we can skip this, maybe. Okay. That should be sharing now.
No, we cannot see it.
No.
It hasn't shared. Yes, it does, but in really minuscule. If you try to.
How about now?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Davey. So as just a small, short little introduction about our research project that we've been conducting, the purpose is to preserve and analyze narratives of Gatumba massacre survivors. And we've been doing this with two different aims. One purpose and goal is to create an online collection of survivor accounts, being able to document the history of the conflict in the broader Great Lakes region, as well as being in alignment with the Gatumba Refugee Survivor Foundation's goal of justice, awareness, and also healing as well. We have found that documenting the Gatumba massacre is absolutely essential because the rather incomplete reconciliation or silence of the massacre has led to lots of detrimental and destructive effects towards victims, family members of victims, and people directly or indirectly associated with the massacre in that region. For those that aren't extremely familiar with the Gatumba massacre in 2004, There was an attack on Congolese civilians and refugees in the small town of Gatumba. Over 150 innocent civilians and refugees were brutally massacred at that time. The presentation disappeared, Dr. Davies, so I'm not sure if you're still there or not.
I am still here.
Awesome. There we go. So how the project came about is through actually a class. Dr. Davey was my professor last semester at Brigham Young University, where we began this project in order to focus on colonization, decolonialism, types of governance and liberation, which allowed us to then further this project and hopefully solidify a more documented account of stories from that time. And as you see here at the bottom of our slide, right, we're always seeking for further participation from members of the community who have a story to share about this massacre. Our progress so far in the research project is rather basic right now because we've only had 9 individuals interviewed so far, but our previous research has been rather productive into the existing conflict literature and published survivor accounts, as well as Dr. Davies' ongoing research in the Banyamulenge identities and participation in that regional conflict. The design that we've conducted this research on is a qualitative methods, more summary and virtual in-depth interviews that's allowing us to create a narrative analysis of these accounts through different thematic coding. As you can see here, there's a couple examples of questions for those that are curious as to how we go about bringing this justice and healing to the individuals, right? We ask, what personal challenges did you experience following the violent experience? How has your life been different because of what happened to you and your family? To what degree do you feel that justice has been served for the perpetrators? And what needs to be done for justice to be fully achieved? We found these questions allow individuals that were directly or indirectly associated with the massacre to allow their stories to be heard as well as documented in order to uphold that aim of finding healing and justice and peace. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. I'll pass it back to myself now. I just have a couple other things I wanted to share about the project. We've learned a few things, and as Jay indicated, the questions that we've been asking survivors have sort of helped not only outline their stories, but then also create a picture of how people relate to past trauma. From the interviews we've conducted so far, we've found a few sort of common themes across them, and we've summarized these a little bit here. Again, going back to that theme of trauma, and how that trauma is experienced in the past but still lives in the present. There was, a lot of talk about justice and what that means today in the context of, moving the community on, but then also engaging in some kind of prosecution for those who are responsible for the massacre. And then, of course, there's a relation to family members who are lost during the attack was an important theme in the interviews as well. So going back to what Alex asked us to focus on at the beginning of our session here was about kind of next steps and what happens. And of course, as Jay mentioned, we're looking to conduct more interviews. We're looking to speak with survivors to add to this collection. Some of our bigger aims are to publish at some point in the coming year or months, hopefully, an accessible online news article, not an academic journal article, but something that can be read by anybody who goes online to learn more about the project and the massacre. We also eventually plan to have an online space for a searchable collection of these testimonies, both again to add to historical narrative about the Gatumba massacre, but then also to sort of stand as a witness to that massacre. Overall, and going back to those goals of the GSRF, we hope that this project will support peace building, particularly in supporting work around justice and memory, in terms of, building a historical narrative supports justice initiatives, but then also that adds to a collective memory, not only for the communities, the Banyamulenge groups, but then also for Congolese and others in the region and globally as well. So I'll end there. I'm happy to answer any other questions as we move into the Q&A part. My email is there if anybody would like to participate in the project, you wish to be interviewed, or perhaps you're an aspiring writer, an academic from the community, you'd like to be involved in another way as well, please get in touch. Okay, thank you.
Chris, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we can hear you, Alex.
Okay, good. I couldn't hear. Okay. No, really, thank you so much for this contribution. I'm sure the network will appreciate this. One of the network's objectives is really to try to document as much evidence, especially these narratives. Having such angle of contribution, I'm sure is something they will love to support you in the process as you continue, and especially accessing people, participant in this research and the process. I'm sure there will be some question at the end. Personally, I have one, but I will leave it to the last minute when we ask a question. The next speakers, two speakers, Shadrach from Genocide Watch and Delphine, who has been incredibly engaged in generally raising awareness through writings, through campaign, and different events, or as an individual in his own capacity. So really welcome. It would be really good to give us some action to take at the end of your 10 minutes presentation. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Okay, hello. I don't know whether Delphine is on yet. I think we were going to talk together. I was going to do a first presentation and Delphine summarizes at the end. Is that correct?
Okay.
Great. Awesome. So I'm going to try sharing the PowerPoint that I've got, but if that doesn't work, no, I think I probably needed to have uploaded it before. That's okay. I don't think we need the PowerPoint too much. It's just to use for me as a guide. So I'm going to be talking about the historical processes of the persecution and what you can call the genocidal process that the Banyamulenge have faced since the colonial era. And at Genocide Watch, we do focus on a lot of different countries and what we recognize as different genocides around the world, but we have tried to have a particular focus on the Banyamulenge community in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, because we do think it's a particularly urgent situation, particularly what's going on now. So although this event is very much focused on the Gatumba massacre, and I'll be talking about the historical process, we are also at Genocide Watch very worried about the current situation that has escalated since 2017. And a lot of our research has been very much reliant on Delphine's own research. So just a quick thanks, Delphine, for all the support that you've given us this past year. And so to move on to this presentation on the historical era, it's worth just reflecting on the significance of the Gatumba massacre within this historical period, or this entire historical process. So as we know, it took part in 2004 and it involved the massacre of over 150 people. So it was a very significant event. And I think what makes it so striking is that it took place at the end of, or just after, the Congo Wars officially ended. The Second Congo War officially ended in 2003, and the country was preparing for a new nationality law, which did at least seek to, or it was intended to, solve a lot of the exclusionary politics that the Banyamulenge had been facing, although, as we know, with very limited effect. But the fact that this massacre took place just after this was going on, I think, was a very important sign that the Banyamulenge as a community were still not safe, just because the war had officially ended, and the violence has protracted ever since then. But also, it's important not to just focus solely on this event, because there were so many different incidents and political processes that the Banyamulenge had faced for decades beforehand. So we're just going to go back in time all the way to the beginning of the colonial era. And the key starting point would, of course, be the 1884 Berlin Conference, when European powers were agreeing to divide different parts of Africa among each other. And the Belgians managed to seize the Congo and set up what they called the Congo Free State. And what was particularly exceptional about Congo Free State, which was also a very cynical name in and of itself, is that it was privately owned by King Leopold II. And it's also worth noting from the offset that the entirety of the Congolese population had been victimized and brutalized by Belgian colonial rule. So we do recognize that many different ethnic groups have suffered, both due to colonial rule and in the aftermath of colonialism. But the Banyamulenge from the beginning was subjected to very heavy persecution. And the key event or development that triggered their persecution and later on their genocide was the removal of their chiefdom. So the Banyamulenge resisted colonial rule, and therefore the Belgians removed their chiefdoms. And that had multiple different effects. So not only did it disempower them in many ways, and we'll have a look into the different ways in which they've been disempowered and how that's negatively impacted them on a day-to-day basis, but also it helped construct this identity that the Banyamulenge are outsiders. And that has been a very, very important idea and narrative that has fueled the justifications for violence against the Banyamulenge to the present day. And this development in constructing the Banyamulenge as outsiders and therefore invaders is very much linked to this very racist colonial theory called the Hamitic hypothesis. And that it basically stated that all civilization that was ever brought to Africa before colonialism was brought by people who were not from Africa and who may have had Caucasian origins. And to elaborate on that, there's this idea that pastoralist, Nilotic outsiders, possibly from Ethiopia or the Great Rift Valley, arrived in the homelands of local Bantu farmers. And so we hear this original narrative in current narratives today, which I'll come back to in a moment, this idea of indigenous Mai groups attacking or driving out these outsiders, these invaders. So this narrative has its origins in colonial rule and a very racist theory, which of course had very different versions across Africa and the broader colonial world. So it's very important to understand the history, and I'm sure a lot of people engaged in this are already familiar with that, but it's a very important starting point to understand why the Banyamulenge have faced so much persecution over time. And so this did not end at all with independence. And independence in 1960, of course, was followed by key world famous events such as the assassination of Patrice Lumumba which of course was a very shocking event in and of itself. It was an attack on Congolese sovereignty, and it was orchestrated by the CIA or perpetrated by the CIA. But in response to that, the reaction to that involved what was known as the Simba Mulala Rebellion. And although there were some Banyamulenge who did participate in this rebellion at first, unfortunately, this outsider label attached to the Banyamulenge had already stuck, and they were still seen as foreigners. Moreover, they were seen as capitalist outsiders due to their pastoralist lifestyle and livelihoods and the way in which they functioned in order to make a living. Of course, that's a very, very severe distortion of truth, but that was the narrative that kept being reinforced. And so they were targeted, they were massacred as early on in the 1960s following independence. Nonetheless, there was a period of security, I guess you could call it a false sense of security in the 1970s, when nationality laws changed and Mobutu felt like he could be more inclusive to both the Banyamulenge and other Banyarwanda groups, other Tutsi and Hutu. That all changed by 1981, where a new nationality law moved the cutoff point to be entitled to Zairian citizenship, as Congolese citizenship was called, given that the country was now called Zaire, moved that back to 1885 in order to exclude a lot of Tutsi and Hutu groups who had migrated from Rwanda after 1885 during the colonial era. Now, of course, a very important point or fact, should we say, to emphasize is that the Banyamulenge largely lived in Congolese territory before 1885, and historical records show that. Nonetheless, this idea that they were outsiders at the time and that they moved after 1885 has still successfully been pushed by people who want to depict them as outsiders. And so that cutoff point was used as a reference point, and therefore the start of colonialism is another important reference point for that reason. And a lot of this manipulation of ethnic divisions by Mobutu was due to different circumstances at the time, such as changes in the economy. So every single time Mobutu was reaching out to Banyamulenge, but also dividing the country against Banyamulenge, it was all very cynical and for personal gain. And so this ended up escalating in the 1990s, and it got to a point where the governor of South Kivu ended up ordering for all Banyamulenge, or all Banyarwanda, or Rwandans, as he put it, to leave. And they were given a 6-day ultimatum in 1996 to leave or face attacks. And this was also coinciding with the Rwandan genocide, where many refugees were fleeing Rwanda, particularly Hutu refugees who were fearing retaliation for the genocide of the Tutsi in Rwanda. But there were additionally, and of course that was exacerbating tensions within the DRC or within Zaire at the time, but also Rwandan Hutu extremists were a threat to Tutsi and Banyamulenge within the Congo. And so in face of all this persecution, Banyamulenge joined the Rwandan invasion and the AFDL rebellion to overthrow Mobutu due to the insecurity and all these different threats against them. So they felt like they had no choice and they joined the rebellion. But this unfortunately reinforced the idea that they were invaders. It reinforced the outsider and invader label, despite the very, very desperate reasons for joining this rebellion. And although they have since distanced themselves from Rwanda and Rwandan-backed invasions, the narrative still depicts, or the dominant narrative is that the Banyamulenge have joined Rwandan-backed invasions all the time, and that they still reflect a Rwandan invasion or so-called balkanization of the Congo, and that has continued since the wars. Although Tutsi joined rebellions such as the CNDP and M23 due to their own security fears and discrimination, and I'm not here to moralize whether or not that was the right thing, but it remains a fact that Banyamulenge opposed these rebellions. But there's been a kind of coalescing and collective association of all different groups seemed to be originally from Rwanda, to band them all together as just Rwandan outsiders, and Banyamulenge end up suffering from that narrative today. So I don't want to go over time, but that's to summarize how the Banyamulenge have been depicted as outsiders over time. And that explains the recent escalation of violence since 2017, where there's been a coalition of Mai teaming up against Banyamulenge fighters. It's very complex yet asymmetric violence, and that in itself gets lost. The Banyamulenge are vulnerable, and the fact that it's complex is used to eclipse the fact that the Banyamulenge are vulnerable and disproportionately targeted, which UN reports have been able to show, even though there's a problem of underreporting there. But in addition to that, the current reports, both in the media and by NGOs, including the UN, completely dismiss this entire history of persecution and discrimination that the Banyamulenge have faced, even though the 2004 nationality laws were made more inclusive by making the cutoff date to obtain nationality moved to 1960. That has not changed the situation for the Banyamulenge. This narrative that they're outsiders still works against them. So there's a lot to resolve there. So hopefully that's a nice, clear, quick whistle-stop tour of the history of the Banyamulenge's persecution. And I'll hand over to Delphin now.
Do we still have 1 more minute, Alex? Thank you, Thomas. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Alex? I'm sure Thomas has covered the main point we planned to share with you today. If we are running out of time, I'm sure we can just wait to elaborate during the Q&A.
Yes, please. Delphin, is it possible to 5-6 minutes? Is that possible to do that?
Yes, I can. Thank you. I want to just to highlight 1 or 2, 3 points, adding to what Thomas has discussed. It's linked to my paper. It's under review within an academic journal, where I tried to elaborate on the link between different events where the Banyamulenge have been killed since the 60s. I followed a line of thought within Rosenberg and Selina. It's called genocide by attrition, where you tend to see indirect methods are being used to annihilate a group. That's typically what's happened to the Banyamulenge since the 60s. I managed to highlight and see a type of link in terms of modus operandi used since the 60s. It targets on a first place men and boys who have been killed since 66, 96, 98, and recently. They've been targeting unarmed military soldiers, whether disarmed or during any training event. They never spared anyone who is a man or a boy. But also I managed to see how the killing itself is embedded within a denial mechanism. It tends to erase the evidences that this has happened when a body were being thrown in waters or by burning them on tires. Maybe the last point in my paper, it's still under review. I hope maybe it will be published. Since the 60s up to now, it's similarly a type of ideology linked to what Thomas has discussed. It's simply targeting the people, the same group, easily identifiable, but also are considered as invaders. It more builds on an ideology of chasing the invaders. It's more linked to the Simba rebellion, and these are the same people probably who have used the same narrative and discourse during the 96, but also 98 and recently. On the way forward, from my point of view, I think probably Thomas may have another idea. I think we needed to look back on where the problem started. Whether the recent constitution has tried to be inclusive, but there's still much an issue on the way nationality is formulated. I might leave this question to lawyers who will be following next to us, but then it's still linking what's discussed as civic nationality or civic citizenship by ethnic citizenship. And then any ethnic group needs to show they have their own territory, and then through such ethnic territory, a group can belong to the state. And then so long as the Banyamulenge still have such problem of their own territory, recently during an event, Babembe community in Uvira have raised the question of nationality. I think there is a possibility of preventing a genocide, but also by looking back, we needed to check how to solve in a sustainable way the way of belonging of the Banyamulenge community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Delphine. Thomas, you forgive me when I was introducing you guys. I couldn't read your name properly, but yeah, that's beside the point. I really wanted to thank you both to your insights, really looking at racial ethnic theory and ideology by colonial power and scholars, and how post-colonial regime have used this. You've also talked about the journey of exclusion by the state, but also the inability of various governments to reinforce unity and the social relationship. Delphine has really talked about some of these papers currently under review. Again, looking at the narratives and discourses of exclusion and persecutions, really around the issue of our ethnic and ethnic identity and that struggle of in the inequality around the management of our governance of our local customary powers and how that impact on ethnic citizenship. I'm sure people will have some questions later to ask you, but I really want to thank Thomas from Genocide Watch, really specifically because currently there's not so many agencies, international agencies, taking such courage and understanding of the persecution of Banyamulenge. In 1996, there were so many agencies, international agencies, especially the media branch of the UN, IRIN, used to come up with so many publications. Recently, we've seen very little. Many Banyamulenge researchers or few people like the work of Chris, but not so many agencies are really coming forward to document what's going on. So Genocide Watch has probably been now. I've not seen a report from Human Rights Watch. I've not seen a report from Amnesty International in the last 4 years, which is so many things have been happening. So again, a message from the organizers to thank you so much for taking such courageous approach. last not least, we have two speakers, both experts in law. This is Professor Felix Ndahinda and Menge. Maître Menge has been really fully involved, actively involved in the justice side of approach, supporting the communities. I'm sure he probably sometimes get frustrated in terms of the type of advice that they should follow to get this this much more to the attention and probably come up with a much more structured approach. But both of them, they're going to talk to us the quest for justice. What is the issue? What's lacking? I hope I'm summarizing that theme, that topic properly. But it would be good in your time to kind of give us some more way forward. What next? What can we do in terms of our network? Thank you. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. All the best to all the community in that evening and that day of memory. Not memory only for memory, but memory to construct something in the future.
Yes, thank you.
To begin this speech, I want to announce you something important. You know that since many months we had constructed a team of lawyers with and including somebody as precious as Felix Ndahinda, but in the meantime our friend Jean-Paul Chaka, Amedeo Kamota in Bukavu, and a lot of others who are supporting us. And I can announce you that the complaint that we had prepared with very strong testimonies of a lot of witnesses who decided to speak, and I think it's very courageous to speak openly and to tell for justice the story of what is happening in Minembwe and in all the area. The complaint is quite ready, and we hope, but it's quite sure, to finalize that all in the coming days, and that in September we should bring a strong complaint to the judicial authorities in Kinshasa. We will go there with support of those courageous women who were threatened those last weeks in the region and who were defended by members of our team in Minembwe first, and after I think they went to Uvira due to the attacks they had to suffer. But we go on, we do that, and we will send a copy of our complaint to the ICC, plus a strong press release, not only in Congo, but we plan to do the same and explain what is happening here in Europe, in Brussels, and I'm sure in New York. So I know that the community had to be patient because it's not easy to prepare all that work, but at the end we have some very strong elements to be brought to justice. I can add in a few words what is the content of the complaint. First, we go back to the historical context, as you received some information, and I cannot renounce to say you that a few days ago I was in another country in Africa. I discussed with an historian who said me, you know, Bernard, story of Banyamulenge community, it's not 19th century, even not 18th century, is more far in the history of a region. It's from 17th century that it happened, and everybody who studied the story of Banyamulenge community can share with you a lot of elements. So we will bring all those elements contextual to avoid those hate speech about the false foreigners that you are. You are really a community with a long story in the region of South Kivu. Secondly, in our documents, we bring all the testimonies we have received from many people, plus the 80 names of personalities of a region who are ready to add their own testimony about what happened. So we have more than 120 people who are ready to explain to justice every detail. And the detail that we received are really interesting about the way that the genocidal process is constructed. On that base, we think that Congolese justice cannot escape to the duty to handle that. And in the meantime, we hope that the United Nations authorities and the international community will bring technical support to our efforts so that everybody can receive a strong file, and on base of that file, I think a lot of criminals can be brought in justice, including, and that I have to point it out immediately, some high-ranked officers of Congolese army who misled the conduct of the people of the army and who created the great trouble and the hate of the Banyamulenge community. So I hope that in September, October, November, you will follow all those elements will be near us, because now the great battle is engaged. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Menge. Is Professor Ndahinda here? Do you want to go ahead, please?
I hope you can. Yeah, I can see myself on the screen now. Yeah, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Maître Menguin. Évidemment, je m'attendais en fait que vous parliez en français, mais voilà, ça marche. Ça fonctionne très bien, très pratique, très anglo-saxon dans la façon de dire. I like it that Menguin followed Alex's advice and ended with started with this talk with the practical side of things. What are the next steps? What is happening, and what is about to happen at this on the judicial side? And that much more of it has to do with the current criminal acts taking place in the whole plateau, and particularly targeting the Banyamulenge community. Now, today we are still talking about Gatumba, and part of the assignment was to link Gatumba to what is happening today from the legal side. Now, when revisiting this talk, I went back to my notes of very many years ago, and I looked at the commemoration we did for the second year after Gatumba, 2006, in The Hague. A few people who are here were part of that, Alex included, among others. And at the time, we had invited people from the International Criminal Court, and basically all we were doing was to feed them back the narratives they produced after the crime occurred. And we were equipped with a very important instrument, which is the report which was compiled after the crime by the UN through three different kind of UN branches. One was the UN mission in Burundi, because there were peacekeepers in Burundi at the time, ONUB. There were peacekeepers in Congo. That was MONUC, and at the time, which became MONUSCO. And they worked together with the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights and produced the report, which documented massacres that occurred in Gatumba, that we rightly call of the genocidal nature. What is important is that even when we talk about genocide, even the report itself did place that. It didn't call the crime itself genocide, but it placed it in a genocidal continuum, which was something, and recommended further investigations. And that's something that we can always build on in doing whatever kind of follow-ups that we want to make up. And I will come back to that later. So visiting those notes, what is important to me is that, and marrying that with that report, there were others by Human Rights Watch, among many others, but I like always to underscore that because UN is the global body that represents the so-called international community, and as such, statements from such kind of a body can always be expected to have some given weight and can be followed up upon. So when I looked at that report, when I look at the narratives of the time, when I'm looking at those notes again, you see that the report was very clear about the testimonies about who did it. Burundian actors, Congolese actors who crossed into Burundi from Congo, and based on languages and testimonies of the time, it was clear that the attack came from Congo, and there were Burundian involvements and Congolese involvements, including the FNL, which recognized the crimes. Look at the report itself and what it says about, for example, in paragraphs 70 and 71, what it says about what the attackers were saying. Basically, it gives you quite some hints of what hate speech you have already still being propagated today on YouTube. At the time, you didn't have much uses of YouTube and Instagram and of the rest. But you had narratives like kill those dogs, those Tutsis. Today, you Tutsis, whether you are Rwandese, Congolese, or Burundians, you will be killed. Down with the Banyamulenge. We must finish off the Banyamulenge. We don't want them to come back to Congo. Those were the themes of 2006. And if you look at YouTube and look at the narratives that you have from quite very many different groups involved in the whole plateau today, the language is not very different from what we have today. Now, moving fast, you had condemnations, very specific forms of condemnations by the international community, starting with the countries from the region. The Burundian authorities did condemn the attack, both the Congolese attackers and the Burundian actors. They did also promise justice. The Congolese president at the time also did promise justice and even recommend an international commission of inquiry. And nearly all important countries in the world, powerful countries from the European Union. Someone has a background noise, maybe they should mute that. All those members of international communities talk about the US, Belgium, the Netherlands, where I currently am, UK. They issued statements condemning the massacres, but also calling for justice. I remember correctly, I have a document somewhere where a British citizen, Richard Wilson, a good friend of Alex, had compiled quotes from all of those actors with exactly what they said and what they promised at the time, just immediately after the massacres. So there was that overwhelming global condemnation, but accompanied also by a promise of justice. And what is very important then in the UN report from the three branches of the UN, MONUSCO, MONUC, and the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, in paragraph 108, I think, 108, they said, allow me to read, at the international level, the appropriate body to continue the investigation and to prosecute those responsible is the International Criminal Court, and the government of Burundi should be encouraged to immediately invoke the court's jurisdiction. The MONUC investigating team has collected information which, although insufficient for drawing conclusion at this stage, could be useful for an investigation by the court. So at the time already, there were suggestions about what that kind of justice could take place. Of course, as we know, later the ICC received the situations from the Congo, and then later they took they assumed the jurisdiction over Burundi, but Gatumba has not been still the focus. And we know that they have received many dossiers and information, as the law goes, related to that. So going forward, as I said, there is a very clear continuum, as also Thomas said and Delphin. There is a clear link between what happened then and what is happening now in the whole plateau. The narratives are the same. The actors, for that matter, are more or less linked. We know, for example, today there is involvement of Burundian actors in the whole plateau, together with my groups. At the time, also the attack was from the plain area, and it involved Burundians and Congolese. There were also allegations of presence of FDLR at the time in some of the reports. So that there is a continuum of agency, the actors involved, but also there is a continuum of those agents carrying the same narratives, the same hate speech. We compiled recently a report showing the different themes. Some of those are those that Delphin and Thomas alluded to. The invaders who need to be taken back, but also there are foreigners, there are Rwandans who need to be returned back home. There are Nilotics and the other Congolese are Bantus. They don't have land, they don't belong there, they need to be returned to where they belong, and so forth and so on. They are hegemonic, they want to, they are the actors of balkanization and all of that. So those narratives already were partially there in those years, or actually very much there at the time, and they are still very much present. And maybe, of course, not maybe, but certainly, the actors have been emboldened by the absence of action regarding what they did in the past, which was not followed up. Now, mindful of the time, we know, of course, that as a general rule, you don't get served justice. You claim for justice, and you seek justice, and you campaign for justice, and you fight for justice. And I guess we need to people involved really need to take bold action in ensuring that all campaigns that are done, they use the right tools. And to me, these early tools already have not been used sufficiently. And all campaigns, I guess, I'm always reminded of the Martin Luther King's bad check imagery. So the Banyamulenge was served a bad check when the crime occurred. Nearly everyone promised justice, promised to do all they can to support justice. And I guess there is a need to go back to all of those actors and remind them of their promises, which have been and remained unsuccessful. Now, as much as the prosecutions of what is happening now are in motion, as Mengen said, there is still very much of a need to initiate similar actions with regards to this imprescriptible crime of Gatumba. Whether that, we know there are many actions that have been undertaken in Burundi, and we know that they have been so far unsuccessful. I guess there is a need to reimagine and keep reminding institutions like the ICC on the need to intervene. Thank you for their time, and I'm happy to also entertain some of the questions that you may have. Back to you, Alex. Back to you, Alex.
Hello, can you hear me? So I think I was on mute. No, thank you so much, both of you, for your insights. Menge has taken us through, kind of giving us an update on the justice process that have been going on, collecting evidence, especially, telling us some positive news on a possible complaint to being structured and to be handed in to the DRC government. He also talked about some for his speeches that have been going on, some criminal activities, responsibilities to this really promising, and he ended up by a positive approach by saying that there is a great battle to start. Professor Ndainda also mentioned about took us through really a link between Gatumba and what's happening now. which is incredibly crucial for this event. I often say to the organizers of this kind of events to say that as much as we need to remember and continue the memorial services, but when we're talking about justice, we need to look at the so what. I think, as I said earlier, this event is incredibly important in the sense that Gatumba has not stopped, and that's what Professor Nain has told us. Took us through kind of started by talking about the history of engagement, some opportunities that were there, some avenues, and it talked about the themes that's going on now and how similar to the narratives that were there in 2004 and 6. Some opportunities that were there, especially in terms of international responses to the Gatumba massacre. And he briefly talked about the jurisdiction, avenues and the opportunities, and hate speeches. Without really going into much details of the summary of their discussions, I really hope that there will be some question to them, especially to get some clarification on what can we hope to see in near future. These were both were the last speakers. I would want to open the floor for questions. We still have hope 20 minutes, 25 minutes. You can address your question to different speakers, but please say your name and one question per person. Thank you. By the way, I was reminded by Innocent that something that Menge may have not mentioned is that they are planning to collect more evidence from the Gatumba survivors. So if you're one of them here and you're willing to provide some testimonies, that's something that the lawyers are really willing to gather. Thank you. Question: How are we going to do that with this technology? I've never used this platform, so I don't know how we're going to use that. Can I go ahead with a question to Professor Ndahinda and Maitre Menge? I work in the DRC and I do political economy analysis, and one of the things which really raise some pessimism is domestic courts, domestic avenues for justice. What is the possibility of knowing those failures of country governance institutions? What is opportunity that there to go via regional powers, regional institutions such as African Union, and go to the sources? What about the legacy of colonialism? That's especially that have subjected Banyamulenge community and excluded Banyamulenge community. Is there something that it can start from regional powers or Belgium itself as a country that has a responsibility in what's going on the Banyamulenge? Maybe a political and illegal type of question. I'm sorry.
Maître Bernard, vous voulez y aller avant ou I go?
You can go. I have some ideas after to share with the community, but begin, Felix.
Thanks, Alex. I mean, lawyers tend to be hated for being too formalistic, and unfortunately, that's true for legal institutions. So the problem with use of a lot of regional kind of mechanisms, you are talking about, let's say, African unions. I guess you are thinking about, for example, the African Court of Human Rights, or
yes,
or you might think of maybe quite a lot of African Commission before that, maybe in Banjul, or whether you are talking about UN mechanisms, you have quite a lot of treaty bodies, civil rights, economic, social, and cultural, and torture, and all of the rest, discrimination convention. A lot of enforcement mechanisms for those tend to require somehow that the actor seeking a remedy has to demonstrate that he has pursued domestic mechanisms, and these were either unsuccessful or they were unavailable. One of those two, unsuccessful or unavailable. So for that region, you might be very much right. I guess it would be very much of a surprise to think that Congolese courts are at a better image than the rest of the country, which is pretty much in a chaotic state in nearly all areas of governance. And we know very well that they are corrupt, they are slow, and seeking true justice is more utopian than real. But it's a mechanism that is worth trying. That's one. And second, you can't fully dismiss them as well. We know that through international campaigns and so on, in recent years, there have been quite a growing jurisprudence of those courts punishing some of the criminals. So especially like military courts have had a record of condemning quite a number of people who committed atrocities when they proven to have committed those atrocities. So keeping that in mind, I guess we shouldn't fully dismiss them. And second, you should always understand them as a next step for moving towards other avenues when those mechanisms, domestic mechanisms, do not get successful. For your second, I'm so much tempted to leave it to my Belgian friend here, but I guess one of the good things as well, which you know very well, is that we know that Belgium now has a parliamentary commission which is looking into its colonial past. As an academic, at least, I'm very curious to know what report they will come up with. And I understand that probably the Banyamulenge have followed closely what is happening there. I wouldn't be surprised if they have taken action as information was requested from different kind of actors. So I would hope that there was information submitted. And once we have what comes from that commission, I guess it might be a good kind of platform to start from in looking at to what you are talking about, Alex. Back to you. Back to you, plutôt, Bernard.
Okay. I'd like to share with you a few elements of reflection. First one, it's very, very important to understand that question of continuum between what happened before Gatumba, what happened in Gatumba, what is happening now, is the same process. There was no Shoah to be understood if you don't look to what happened with Jewish community in the 19th century. The process is going on, and according to what I am seeing is, I say you, the process is going on, and nobody can say today that there is no a major risk that at a certain moment there should be an explosion with the idea of some people, okay, all those people will have to be killed and to leave. And for me, this is a very important question. And for me, what we are doing now with our complaint is trying with our little forces to interrupt the process. What is the real great question is not only to obtain justice for the past, but to interrupt a process who can bring more people suffering tomorrow. Secondly, of course, we have all to make a great reflection about what is the place of a judicial file in the history of a country. What I have observed is at any moment there was something coming from the legal point of view who was like a great signal to say, no, it has to be changed. It happened with the Black community in the United States. It happened with the procedure against Mandela in South Africa. Before those legal procedures, so many generations and so many people who suffered without justice, without media campaign, without knowledge of what they made, so that at a certain moment, something happened in favor and in the good direction. In your situation, we are precisely there. We do not know how long time it will take to change. But if we do nothing, we are sure we are going to the worst. If we do something, we create some chance that it should change in the coming years. And finally, never forget that when we enter with such a complaint, we begin with a big battle. And of course, we have to convoke history. When we prepared the complaint, we discussed all together, and I supported the idea that we must clarify in the complaint the historical aspects. And because why today people say Banyamulenge are foreigners, they are not Congolese, they occupy a place where they have no right, and so on and so on. How is it possible to create legitimacy about those kind of speeches when you see the history? So the historic aspect is very important. And of course, the responsibility of Belgium is so great because it is in our colonialist country that we begin to make the great distinction between Hutu and Tutsi and Mulenge over communities, Hamitic, Nilotic, and so on and so on. And we need to clarify that all. There is no ethnic difference. Ethnic is just the overname of racist. When people begin to speak about ethnic, it's because they don't dare to say what is the worst word is racialistic. Secondly, concerning the commission of a Belgian parliament, I think I have no hope about that commission, because I have observed that inside the commission, arbitration is not linked to learn about the reality of history, but is to come back with old political movements. You see, you had the Catholic one, the French Catholic, the Flemish Catholic, the other side, and you know that all those groups are involved in the history of the Great Lakes region, and they try to preserve some position. So, in my opinion, but perhaps I'm wrong, it's not in the hands of those kind of commission. And even that commission doesn't share anything, because the reality should be to create a commission between 2 or 3 states of a region with historians, that the historians are going to work during a lot of years to prepare something of quality, and then after, politicians come back and begin to see what is significant for the region today and how to solve all together in Burundi, in Rwanda, in Congo, North Kivu, South Kivu. It doesn't exist today. And so today, the question of history of Banyamulenge community, the question of history of eastern part of Congo is in your hands and in the hands of the people who reside there. No less, no more. Like the question of justice, let me finish and tell you a little story. After the genocide in 1994, some people in the international community suggested to the new government in Kigali to organize a big commission, Truth and Reconciliation. And at that period, they sent some people to South Africa to meet the brothers and sisters of the ANC movement. And you know what was the reaction of the people of ANC? It was to say, please, don't abandon the question of justice, because Truth and Reconciliation Commission is the price we had to pay to stop with apartheid, that there should be no justice for our victims for the past. So if you can keep the question of the justice, you can go deeper in your fight and in your battle to stop the violence process. I think it must be the same for eastern part of Congo.
Thank you so much, Bernard. Thank you for your insight. I really hope the host, Innocent, or any assistant is taking note of some of, especially some of the questions that will be asked and the response from the speakers and experts. Thank you. I have a question from Delphin Tanyuma to Chris. Will the project be extended to other events in which the Banyamulenge were killed? Are you able to answer this question, Chris and Jay?
Yep, I'll answer for both of us. Jay had another commitment that he had to go off to. So yeah, I think this is a really important question. The project itself is narrow in its scope, just to make sure that we do well a small thing first before considering branching out. That being said, and this is why it's important for the project to work alongside other analysis, including a publication as well. That it's important to consider, not Gatumba as a single moment, but in a broader storyline, if you will. So that's something that the project will do, is we will contextualize what happened in Gatumba, both in terms of the conflict that spurred the event itself with the occupation of Bukavu, which pushed people into the refugee camp in the first place, as well as sort of the bigger events of the Congolese wars. So there is a bigger story there. The project itself is small in scope, again, to get right what we're seeking to do before we then consider other things. I would say that in my own research that I am, looking at Gatumba in that broader context. So certainly there's a lot of value in doing that. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Chris. A question from you. I guess I think Thomas has volunteered to answer this. You talk about complexity that's been touched on by so many speakers, by all speakers here, and questioning whether what then if the importance of considering perspective from all parties on the ground, as well as from NGOs working on dialogue and negotiation in the past few years in the area. Thomas, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, of course. I'll try and be as quick as possible and other people can add to my answer. So I totally agree that it is important to understand everyone's perspective, and that includes victims from other groups who have also been targeted by violence, and then also other actors who are engaged in as you say, maybe with the peace talks and other forms of dialogue. But what I think is also important to consider is that the narrative and the experience of the Banyamulenge from the Banyamulenge's perspective isn't undermined. And although it is important to recognize that any victim of any form of violence, regardless of what group somebody belongs to, is of course a very horrific experience to go through, it's important not to use that reference to complexity as a way to undermine when one group is particularly vulnerable and has maybe a disproportionate level of fear of facing extermination, or has already gone through a disproportionate level of persecution and violence. And of course, this reference to complexity, as I said earlier, does end up often eclipsing the historical experience of the Banyamulenge. So I'm not saying that we should be biased towards one group. I'm just always kind of cautious of highlighting that the Banyamulenge experience is often undermined and underreported.
Thank you, Thomas. I also have a question from Ben, who's making point that actors in these massacres involved external armed groups who are believed to be supported by other countries. I think he's asking, is there any way to hold these actors accountable as part of all this the quest for justice? Thank you.
I'll go maybe quickly, and I'm sure Bernard will say something. Can you hear me, Alex?
Yes, can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Allow me a quick word maybe from the previous question, and it's not mindful of the time. Chris, maybe one thing I need to know about complexity and need to take into account other groups as well. I guess nobody would argue for the necessity of only considering victims from their communities and so on. That's communitarianism at the worst. At the same time, the worry always about that narratives about all actors and so on is sometimes that this also brings in a way of not even following that complexity, and maybe looking at the complexity, doing what Menge was almost calling racism by not acknowledging, let's say, some of the specificities of certain given criminal acts. We know that in comparative perspectives, the narratives around whatever was happening in Rwanda in '94, for example, was that it was intertribal killings. So no need to intervene here, really. Hutus are killing Tutsis and Tutsis are killing Hutu. It's the favorite kind of sport in that area, and no need to worry much. That happens there. That being said, frankly, I believe that a lot of people, I mean, I wrote a paper on that in 2016 about different narratives of subjectivity around victimhood. And I believe very many people are victimized in the DRC. But for example, in South Kivu, there is general victimization. There is a very specific Banyamulenge victimization, and the ways different people are victimized and the reasons for victimizations are quite different. And that requires a little bit of special attention, I would argue. Back to Ben's question, I guess the answer really from my side is simple. My understanding of the laws of many different countries, including Congolese laws and laws of countries from the region, from my understanding, but also international laws, tend to consider crimes territorially. So regardless of who commits crimes, regardless of their nationality, they can be prosecuted. So there is absolutely no reason why those people who are committing crimes in Congo, who are Burundians or other nationalities for that matter, cannot be prosecuted in Congo, in Burundi, or through an international mechanism. Back to you, maybe Bernard.
Yeah. I have a first element to share with you, and for me it's very, very important. Never forget how strong are the testimonies of the witnesses, of the direct witnesses. I have now some experience since quite 30 years in the region about crimes. And when you have a direct witness and he can identify names, person, where they're coming from, where they were, or it was handled. And if you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 witnesses who are together to tell the same story, we begin to create kind of evidence behind all doubts, to use a wording from lawyers. But this is very important, because when we speak about groups coming from outside, like FNL, like Red Tabara, like some people of Kayumba or other people, when you look to the witnesses, what is very interesting is they give you strong information. They give you names, they give you where the people are coming, how they were together. When you speak about a Babembe coming from that village with those people from the army. And this is very, very interesting, because on that base, you can construct a judicial file. And this is a great difference between human rights reports or political reports or all the documents, and what is the day-to-day work of lawyers or investigators to bring back some strong reality. And I have to add that today we have additional elements, is laptops, mobile phones. With mobile phones, I have observed that now we can create material evidence above the testimonies. Because, you know, there were some people with ideology saying Tutsi are all liars, and you know, that kind of things. But this is not easy for them to continue to say that, because now we have strong elements. This is very, very important. And the second element is, before what kind of jurisdiction, we can bring the first jurisdiction, international jurisdiction, with competent, is, of course, the place where the crime took place. After you have criteria of competency. If I am, for instance, a Belgian, if I commit an assassination wherever in the world, a judge in Belgium can handle the file against me. So you have the question of territory, you have a question of nationality. Third, you have the question of the residence of victims when there are crimes against humanity or crimes like genocide that can justify international jurisdiction with when the people are can be found there. And fourthly, we have international jurisdiction of ICC, but it's a subsidiary jurisdiction. This is the reason why the strategy is to bring the file before the court in Congo first, but together to the ICC, so that if there is no way to handle it in Congo, the ICC remain competent. It's the same concerning Burundi, with one problem is that the international jurisdiction of ICC didn't exist when Gatumba massacres happened, but I am not going to enter in technical questions. So you see, when you go deeply with investigation, you can break very, very good elements of evidences, and it clarifies very much what happened. And secondly, there are different ways, but of course, at a certain moment, it's a question of judicial governance by the states, and that's not easy. Hello?
Hello. Thank you so much, Mete Bernard. Thank you.
I will be obliged to leave you. I am so sorry. If you allow me,
that's
I
okay.
present you my excuses.
No, thank you so much. I think we still have Professor Felix, your colleague here. So yeah,
Yeah.
if you have to
And
go
you
to
know,
other
everything about all our efforts, and I thank you so much for his strong contribution. This is a perfect partner for me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Bernard. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Great.
everybody, and
Bye-bye.
and I am with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. I think we're coming to the end. I need to hear from the host, Innocent. I think we are finishing. I guess we mark point to all of you speakers. I can summarize all speakers in two contexts: the legal and academic interventions, research, and legal process. It is really to see how these approaches often can work in a parallel to policy policy making or policy and decision making. For those who are involved in research, it's really to think about what are potentials for this for your work to be disseminated in spaces where we're more likely to hear responses from policymakers. And for those in a legal context, is really looking at how these legal approaches are going on, these legal processes, how can actually be an opportunity to influence political decisions. I know this is really kind of a naive comment from a legal expert, but we need to keep thinking that side because of a ticking time. We should have given you the context beginning. We're talking about 85% now of our villages of Banyamulenge have been destroyed. Their livelihood in terms of cattle herding has been destroyed too by probably over 90%. Now, really, we talk about a very small community, which is kind of like a concentration under siege. So, therefore, this type of approaches need to be proactive in terms of reaching the powers that could actually be able to respond in other ways. Yeah, a big, probably big, ambitious question to you to think about. Okay, I will hand it to the host. Is 7 o'clock now. The time that we were supposed to finish. I don't know whether Innocent want to say a few words, especially to thank the speakers, so that we can finish. Thank you.
Giving me this time to thank everybody. Thank you, Chris. I can see you. You did a very good job. We've been all year working together, taking testimonies from all the witnesses all over the world. Thank you very much, Delphi, with what's the name again? Sorry, I forgot the name. And it's me who invited him. It is Delphi who let me know him. I need to say him correctly his name before. Thomas. Thank you very much, Thomas. The very brilliant presentation from the history context of Banyamulenge till now, what is going on. I really appreciate Felix and everybody who participated, the witnesses who give testimony for what's happened to them in Gatumba. It was a really, really brilliant meeting. I want to highlight one thing before we finish. Gatumba project is quite now 17 years so far. There's nothing has been done so far. We all know that due to the political aspect, the evidence are there. But at the end of this year, we're planning to collect all the testimony from the survivor all over the world with all the lawyers, with the guidance from Menge and Jean-Paul and the other lawyers like Felix. So we invite everybody who can contribute to to give his time to collect those evidence, because we don't have like a budget or financial things we need to give ourselves, to give our time as a voluntary work. So anybody who really want to join the team to take all testimony, we can contact me or Bernard or Jean-Paul to help us to collect all the evidence. So thank you, Alexis Vuka, for chair the meeting. You did a very good job. And I hope next time we do better than this. And I do apologize for any inconvenience for online issues. If anything happen, so I hope next time we make it better. Thank you for the technician, David. See you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Innocent.
Thank you, Innocent. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Minsi 13 ukwezi k'umunani 2004 mu Gatumba narahekuwe bizatuma kwicwa no kurengana bitazongera kubaho ku bwoko bwacu. Bizatuma tutongera kumva induru y'abicwa, bizatuma tutongera kubona biruka bahunga. Twibuke Abanyamulenge bishwe rubi. Twese hamwe twibuke abacu. Ndibuka impinja n'abana bato bishwe ubwoko. Ndibuka abasore n'inkumi bishwe rubi. Bishwe
turabibuka mfura z'Umurenge turabazirikana bana b'iwacu turabibuka mfura z'Umurenge turabazirikana
ndarira kibuka ya joro ijoro ryanze guca ijoro rya Gatumba ijoro ryanze guca ndarira kibuka ya joro ijoro ryanze guca ijoro rya Gatumba ijoro ryanze guca dufite agahinda turababaye dufite agahinda turababaye bana b'iwacu turabibuka urazimurenge turabazirikana bana b'iwacu turabibuka urazimurenge turabazirikana mwishwe muzize uko mwaremwe urazimurenge turabazirikana ndibuka Kadafi Minyati na Nyamasosoro Tekereza ndibuka Nyaumure Gasosi ndibuka Ntarutwa Nyamusore na Bisetsa Rukamigo ndibuka Fiye Haizuru na Nyabyiza Gato ndibuka Munoni Muhimuzi na Esperance Shemu ndibuka Musa Shoni na Ziraje Kasa ndibuka Dudu Bitati na Bebe Zaroti ndibuka Neza Kanyabitabo na Chantal Musafiri ndibuka Claude Gabingi na Lydia Musafiri ndibuka Muhora na Mandevu na Fisto Butoko ndibuka Nyabyinshi Muhire na Dando Mukwi ndibuka